The 30-minute plan is a toolbox to define the specific actions you need to take in the event of an ammonia release to accomplish the 4 levels of response: discovery, initial response, sustained response, and termination of the emergency. Before we discuss how to implement the 30-minute plan, it's important to note that not all facility ammonia releases are the result of an emergency event or accident. There's always the possibility of an incidental release during high-risk maintenance or repairs at your facility. The best emergency strategy involves the ability of the repair team to prevent or mitigate the threat before the incident turns into an emergency.
We have all of our PPE on and we're entering the engine room.
If you're going to open your ammonia system, that's probably when you're going to have the highest risk of having an ammonia release. So if we're doing that, why not put our team on standby on pre-emergency readiness?
So if there was an issue to come up, that they would be prepared to go into a first alert mode.
If you're doing maintenance and you're in total control of that particular part of the system, you've got the valve shut off, you're in control, you have your monitor, and the atmosphere should rise up to 250 parts per million. It's still incidental. You're in control. You shut off a valve, you stop the leak, you know it's going to linger for a while, you back out, and you're done.
It is also important to work closely with your contractor when planning your emergency response.
As a contractor, we work with plants like yours that have maintenance and service technicians, but maybe not be doing everything. We are there to be a partner with them. We're working with facilities to be involved with practicing pre-emergency readiness to safely make repairs, to be their technical advisor, and to engage emergency shutdown procedures in a defensive mode.
And anything further which should help us mitigate any type of leak scenario that would happen either during a release or to respond when we do have a release.
The contractor is very valuable when planning incident action plan objectives needed to contain and control a potential release. When do we decide that an ammonia release is an emergency event? An emergency event occurs when a situation creates a higher level of danger than those in the immediate area of the event are able to safely handle based upon their personal protective equipment and training. Factors that further qualify that an incident is transitioning into an emergency event include the need for evacuation, entry into atmospheres that are immediately dangerous to life and health, or if the incident poses a serious threat of fire, explosion, or potential exposure to toxic substances. If an employee is uncertain of the severity or degree of hazard, err on the side of safety and deem it an emergency event. The employer must decide the strategy and the response objectives included in the emergency plan. The first decision is to decide if the plant will use an emergency action plan or an emergency response plan. The EPA and OSHA require life safety and emergency shutdown procedures for all emergency action plans.
What EPA is looking for is when you set up your action plan or your response team, and to make that decision on whether or not you're going to have a full response team, they're looking for you to coordinate those efforts. So if you don't have the personnel to have a response team, you better be sure that the fire department down the road can come in and help you respond.
Operators working in an emergency action plan may not work in dangerous conditions while engaging emergency shutdown.
So how far should companies go with their emergency response capabilities? Well, if you have maintenance people who like to fix things, knowledge is power. Give them the knowledge to technician level where legally they can be responders and they can take an offensive role in an emergency.
Employers may equip their operators with personal protective equipment to engage shutdown procedures in conditions that are greater than the permissible daily exposure level. But working conditions must not exceed the immediately dangerous to life and health conditions, which is 300 parts per million. Once you've exceeded 300 parts per million, your incident requires a higher level of planning, which OSHA defines as an emergency response plan. This means the response team's level of personal protective equipment, chemical monitoring, training, and standards of operation are clearly defined in the emergency plan. The 30-minute plan is a one-page checklist that guides the command team's actions through the 4 phases of emergency response. Discovery and initial response are the first 2 phases.
The first 30 minutes of an incident are pretty critical, and that's when you're really engaging your action plan. You're thinking about life safety, the employees, getting your employees to a safe location, and just figuring out what the problem is. And at that point, you can have discovery. Where did it happen? Then you'll know, is it coming from an engine room? Is it coming from a dock? Is it coming from the roof? And then your operators can start to assess the situation.
And you have to implement your emergency shutdown procedure from a non-dangerous area.
All ammonia users should be capable of implementing the discovery and initial response phases within the first 30 minutes of an emergency event. Every incident, regardless of the level of engagement for containment and control, requires a command team.
Incident command system concept is not just something that we in the fire service employ. It's something that's good business practice, even for the industrial side of this. The incident commander is not all-seeing and all-important. The incident command team is what's important.
The command team must always be led by a plant incident commander, or IC, who will coordinate and manage the overall emergency incident. The plant IC will delegate responsibility to 3 key positions as the incident progresses. The lead responder must be prepared to mitigate the hazards, risks, and threats within the initial isolation zone, or hot zone. This includes moving people to safety and engaging emergency shutdown. The notification leader makes all of the critical calls and documents the key information that occurs during the incident. All incoming and outgoing calls are managed through the notification team. The evacuation group supervisor is responsible for moving non-emergency personnel to safety. Based upon the vapor movement, the evacuation supervisor will decide to move people to a safe refuge, rally point, or to shelter in place. All personnel will be accounted for, and access controls must be put into place that stop incoming traffic from entering the initial isolation zone.
One of the most important things is that when we have an emergency, that we have the ability to do our job.
And by having notification leads and an incident commander and other team members outside of the maintenance department to be able to handle life safety while your maintenance personnel are trying to figure out what the source is and how to shut it down.
The importance of building up a team is beneficial for the community as well as the site. I currently use my office as my notification team, and I use my facility service manager and his staff for first response. I use my operations manager for evacuation.
The emergency planning process starts with defining the hazard zones within the plant. Hazard zones are locations within the plant that have higher than average risks and threats. The idea is to define the risks and threats and to plan for engaging emergency shutdown operations that would effectively stop the problem when it's small. For example, the refrigeration mechanical room would be considered a primary hazard zone.
Part of the connectivity between the response team, be it the entry team or the people in the background that are not really in the hot zones or danger zones, is knowing the levels of concern really well.
An emergency response involving a release of ammonia has 3 levels of concern. Level 1 is a small release, under 100 pounds of ammonia. Level 2 is an event that is either out of control or not completely contained, or vice versa, and is not a significant life threat. Level 3 is an emergency event that is out of control and is not contained, an obvious high risk and threat to responders and community. The level of concern communicated by the plant IC triggers pre-authorized actions that the command team members key in on immediately. The goal is to reduce the reaction time by pre-authorizing action on the part of the command team. The response team actions are linked to many different position checklists, quick guide informational sheets, and other critical information needed to manage an emergency event of any kind. Each command team member uses a position packet that provides the possible forms and guides needed to perform their assignment. The command team packets are preloaded with site-specific details that are helpful when training for the position.
This helps all of our personnel to know what we're doing at the time, and it's not just SOP, it's more intense, it's better because we have the pictures and things so we can actually show what we're doing, and it really is a learning aid for new people that we hire.
There are opportunities to improve the command team's reaction time while also improving responders' safety. One way is to prescribe a hazard analysis quick guide to define and communicate risks and threats to the command team. This is much the same as a professional football team using a game plan. The coach, plant IC, calls the play. The quarterback, lead responder, engages the plan. And the rest of the team supports the engagement of the play in accordance with a prescribed game plan. A strategy is selected that often leads with a strong defense and then targeting the offensive action plan to win the game.
The one plan, to me, allows us as a site to prepare, resolve issues within 10 to 15 minutes before we have intervention from a fire department.
And this is where our training comes in. This is where our team players have to be focused, they have to be trained, and they have to have that muscle memory within them to remember what we have to do, what steps we have to do, in what chronological order we want to do them, who needs to be notified.
By us doing this and getting control of it quickly, in the first 30 minutes, we can stop major amounts of damage to the product and, more importantly, to our people and personnel and people in our neighborhood.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and be lead responder on this.
Those facilities that choose to engage an emergency response plan may require responders to go into the danger zone to contain and control an emergency. They must comply with OSHA, PPE, and training standards.
As employers, we have the option to what level we engage during an event. 5,000 parts per million in level B dress allows me to go in there and mitigate the problem. One, if my IC has given the order and we have a buddy system.
OSHA and EPA recognize 4 basic levels of personal protective equipment, levels A, B, C, and D. The Level D ensemble defines the basic work uniform with all skin protected, gloves, safety boots, safety glasses, and whatever other safety measures that are appropriate for protecting against day-to-day work hazards. The Level C ensemble is used while working on the ammonia system. The operators should have total skin coverage, overalls, gloves, Nomex hood, an ammonia monitor that is good to 300 to 400 parts per million, and an air purifying respirator. Level B is used for emergency response, but has limitations to low-level vapor, no aerosol threat, not to exceed 5,000 parts per million of vapor. The Level B ensemble includes double gloves, an ammonia monitor that reads up to 5,000 parts per million, and a self-contained breathing apparatus worn over a chemical protective suit that is taped to reduce the potential for ammonia vapor causing skin irritation. The Level A ensemble includes a fully encapsulated chemical suit capable of resisting the hazards, risks, and threats of the given emergency situation, to include flash suit, thermal protection for ammonia exposure down to minus 60 degrees Fahrenheit, and appropriate permeation and penetration standards. It's important for local public safety responders and the plant command team to work together on pre-emergency planning. This will help them to prepare for the first moments of size-up and engagement during an actual emergency.
The idea is that you build trust by talking to people, you build confidence by interacting with them. And what we're strongly suggesting here is that the more that you do that at every different level, the more likely you'll have an appropriate response when you're under stress.
One of our objectives when we come out to a facility like this is to build relationships with the staff here, so we understand when we show up, we know who we're going to deal with, and we understand what their procedures are.
Get private industry and the fire service together and start training, doing walkthroughs, and figure out what's on site for equipment.
One of our goals is that we get a grip on their shutdown procedures and that they understand the importance of life safety and what it means to us when we show up.
As a fire chief, I've responded to several industrial incidents in the past where it was utter chaos. That first 30 minutes is critical.
The first-in fire officer may be a fire captain or lieutenant. They will arrive with a fire engine or aerial ladder truck with 2 or 3 firefighters.
When I get on the scene, the first thing I like to see is somebody that coordinated as a plant manager or somebody that's in charge, so that as we get on the scene, we can get a report of what's going on.
So when we show up, we have a game plan already established. They've done their checklist, they've got their 30-minute plan in place, they've done everything that they need to do to share it with us. Now we have a really good understanding of what they're expecting from us, and they have an understanding of what we expect from them.
The size-up logic used by the fire service is often called a CAN report. CAN stands for Conditions, Status of the Emergency, Level of Concern, Initial Isolation Zone, and Nature of the Incident. Actions, what have you done? Personnel accountability and the status of emergency shutdown. Needs, what help do you want? Rescue, medical, decon, support for emergency shutdown, ventilation. After completing the CAN report, the Public Safety IC will have the option of taking command. If an emergency event is a level of concern of 2 or 3, the Public Safety IC is likely to take command and ask that the Plant IC serve as a plant liaison. The plant response team will work through the plant liaison to take actions that are consistent with the incident action plan developed by the Public Safety IC. The Public Safety Incident Commander will benefit from the details provided within the 30-minute plan and the playbooks. If the incident transitions to a sustained response, the Public Safety Commander will likely transition to a chief officer.
With that, I'm going to get a briefing from that company officer and the liaison for the ammonia industry on what's been done already. Once I get the briefing, then I'm going to turn the captain back over to his or her unit, and they're going to work on the operational side. I'm going to notify my dispatch center, let them know that the chief officer on scene will be assuming command.
I'm going to be assuming incident command.
One plan has a great idea. It has pictures. We can actually show the fire department exactly what we're going to do. The first responders can go in there. They can see the valves without me even going inside. So they can say, okay, there's the valve. There it is. Very simple.
Rescue, medical, and decon are the most urgent life safety readiness issues to be addressed. It's important to understand how to safely engage rapid entry rescue. Fire agencies are reluctant to engage their firefighters unless they're trained and prepared to recognize and avoid injury from the ammonia release.
If there's a rescue situation or a life safety situation that we need to be involved in, we'll do that right from the beginning. We're not going to wait for additional resources to show up before we risk a lot to save a lot. So if there's somebody there that needs our assistance immediately, we're going to go to work.
Firefighters need to understand the protection levels afforded by their fire turnouts or bunker gear and SCBA to conduct a rescue. A hazard analysis quick guide provided in the 30-minute plan and in the command packet includes the acute exposure guideline levels, often called AGLES, which defines the levels of exposure represented by a parts per million for a specific time. This information is needed to decide if firefighters will consider doing a rapid entry rescue. Engaging emergency shutdown operations and providing adequate ventilation of fresh air to the victim assures a higher expectation for doing a rescue of a live victim. The first 30 minutes offers many chances to solve the emergency challenge. The incident should now be transitioning to a sustained response that is guided by a safe and effective incident action plan. Or the incident is deemed controlled and contained by the IC, and a termination of emergency proclamation is signed and transmitted to the plant IC. In some cases, the Public Safety IC may attach conditions to the termination agreement that require safety, security, and/or inspection follow-up.
In the final analysis, almost everything we do has one particular outcome, and that is that we either control an emergency or it controls us.
Accidents are going to happen, but to be prepared is the key. To be on top of the issue before it happens or as it's happening and being able to react with it is number one.
The safety of our employees and of ourselves is the utmost importance. We don't need heroes. We don't need double rescues. We need plans. We need executed plans. We need to live this thing from day to day.
And this is a great plan for everyone to start using. But having our firefighters believe in us, having them know us when they roll up, that type of thing is something that we have to work on and keep working on year in and year out.
Being proactive instead of reactive, have the plan, train on the plan, know the plan, then everything's going to move quicker. You're not going to have a sustained incident. It's always going to be something that's mitigated in 30 minutes or less.